Hello everybody, welcome to another review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the brand new album by Shame. This is their fourth record, Cutthroat. I talked about their Food for Worms record back in 2023 and I quite liked it. I feel like Shame's first three albums are pretty strong in their own way. Each album has its own unique identity that makes it stand out for all the right reasons. And even if Food for Worms out of the first three was seen as the outlier, the weakest one, I personally still enjoyed it with the amount of fun material on there. I didn't really care, it was generally a fun time, and that's all that really matters. Even if it isn't quite as intricate or doesn't have quite as many bangers as something like Songs for Praise, I don't give a shit. As long as it's entertaining, that's all it needs to be. Now, Cutthroat is another entry into this, and it's probably the most distinctive album when it comes to Shame. It does feel like a Shame record, but there is a lot of stuff that does bring this one to be feeling quite different. So the singles, I'll be honest, were quite hit or miss. Cutthroat, the lead single, great track, probably the best song on the record still. This one just straight away was what it needed to be. It feels like Shame, it has the energy of Shame, and it's just a fun time. That's all you can really ask for. It just plays into the best aspects of it, what Shame could be doing right now, and props them for that. Quiet Life was decent. I feel like it does have some good ideas into it, but I don't think they execute it as well as they could have, and it just kind of felt a bit kind of out there for a Shame track. I mean, it still feels like them, but kind of feels like they're leaning more on the indie aspect a bit on this. And then Spartak did kind of that with a song that felt quite similar to that Wonder Horse release, which is unfortunate because Spartak could have been interesting, but I just find it just to feel just like a copy of it, or not a copy, but an accidental just recreation of that, with just kind of lacking the fun aspect to their sound. It just kind of feels like a more beige indie track. So I was kind of thinking that we had a good single, an alright single, and a weak one, but that doesn't really speak for the whole record. I feel like the record could be a lot stronger, so I had to see what the new content was. And going from this album for a first listen, I really kind of struggled to summarise if I even enjoyed it as much as I wanted to, because frankly, we'll be honest, one of the biggest downfalls is just that it's not that memorable, to be honest. I feel like this Shame record does have some good ideas just hidden within the kind of lackluster lyrics, just kind of the not really as interesting guitars or drums for that matter. It just kind of feels like everything's made just because they just needed to get a record out. I don't think they quite had the soul into this record. It feels like the concept they wanted to go for, they just didn't really want to write it entirely, but they just wanted to stick with something that they could do for a record, and that's it. I'm not trying to put this one down straight away, but I just don't really see much of the magic or creative aspects that they had in the first three records really shown here. And I mean, if you prefer this direction, then I can honestly see people liking this more than Food for Worms, because this one kind of brings in feels that album did, but also kind of ties into a bit more of the kind of, I guess, more of their normal sound, but in a weaker territory. I feel like while you do have some indie sounding tracks, that's only kind of a few of them, and the rest of the album does bring in some energy, some fun moments, but I honestly think it's a bit too late for that at this point. When you get a lot of songs on here which I just don't think quite go up to speed with some of the best writing or punchy ideas, I just kind of lose the interest a bit. The first half of the record, or at least the first 5 songs, all back to back, are fine. I think Cutthroat obviously starts off in an amazing way. Cowards Around is decent. Quiet Life is just decent. Nothing Better is decent, and Plaster does have some interesting ideas. Decent is probably the word I would use to describe a lot of this record. I don't think anything is in particularly bad per se, but the biggest aspect that kind of wears this down is just how weak the second half is. Spartak onwards is kind of where it's hit or miss. Spartak I wasn't that big on. Then you get the song Lampião, which I just thought this one was just kind of silly. I get what they're trying to do here, but I just don't really care for it. I just found that with the weak instrumentation, trying to tell a story, kind of came off as a very mediocre, bland yard act song, especially when they try and put in a bit of the kind of silly dance punk here and there in some of the songs, but this really didn't work. I unfortunately thought this one was pretty rough. After Party just sounds like an obnoxious cacophony of guitars and drums trying to be as deranged and pretty much just uncomfortable to listen to. It's not creative or experimental where it just sounds like you're whamping the guitars, you're just creating the most obnoxious sound. That doesn't make good music. It just sounds terrible, and even the chorus on this is certainly not one of their best. After Party is probably one of the worst songs I think they've ever written, without a doubt. It does pick up a bit with Screwdriver. I love this one, especially towards the end. I think it's got some nice ideas, but I'm not really feeling much of the record from that point on. The second half, it has a few good songs, but I feel this is just the experimental week. We kind of needed to finish the record off, so here's the rest of the album feel, and it just doesn't work in my opinion. I was quite gutted because I generally felt like Shame had a lot of good potential, especially with Cutthroat. I feel like if they just managed to keep what worked with Cutthroat and put for a whole record, it would have been crazy. It would have been a pretty good album, and it could have even been better than Food for Worms, which is probably like up to this point one of the more controversial albums, but still a beloved one. But this one I just feel is honestly the kind of first weaker album they've had, by a margin as well. There is even some of the best songs aren't particularly that catchy, aren't particularly that great, and even a lot of Food for Worms songs would knock it out of the park in my opinion. This is another band that's suffering with the 4-album kind of situation, where the 4th album tends to be one of the weakest and just not that interesting. A lot of bands fall under this. Bands like Volu have had that with Friend of a Phantom, albeit I love that album, but a lot of people didn't. Even bands like Starset, Horizons is definitely the weakest of them. And if you're going to go with so many bands, I mean, Foo Fighters 1 by 1's another one, and it just keeps going on and on. Some bands will manage to make their 4th album insanely good, or experimental, or at least they start to shift sound here. And Shane kind of did that, but in the worst way possible, in one of the weakest ways possible. So it's unfortunate. I think Shane's new album is a shame. It could have been a lot more, but for what we got, which is kind of a mid, alright record, it's not bad. It's definitely got some good stuff, but I really don't see the need to kind of go out to listen to it. It's just kind of a fine album. So I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5. It is decent. I just don't think it is really that great. It's okay. I just really feel like this is probably the biggest letdown we've had, but it could have been worse. That's what I'm saying. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next video.